Have you ever wondered why being just exceptionally good at your job can sometimes lead straight to your downfall? It sounds totally backwards, right? I mean, shouldn't brilliance, hard work, and excellence automatically get rewarded? Well, today, in this explainer of Robert Greene's foundational rules of power, we're unpacking a concept that completely flips everything we're taught about merit. Law 1. Never outshine the master. Because, as we're going to see from the source material, the psychology of power is rarely logical, and showing off superior talent or charm, it can actually be the absolute most dangerous thing you can do for your career. Let's get into it.
Balthasar Gracian wrote this over 300 years ago. All superiority is odious, but the superiority of a subject over his prince is not only stupid, it is fatal. And honestly, this rings incredibly true in today's corporate environments. That word, fatal, he's not exaggerating there. The core concept here is the severe, literal danger of making those above you feel inferior. We have to remember power holders are humans first, and human egos, well, they are incredibly fragile.
So picture the workplace hierarchy like this sky. You've got the sun, that's the master, the boss, the patron, the leader. They're radiant, they're the center of the universe. And then you have the stars. That represents the subordinates. Now, the stars might actually be just as brilliant, maybe even more brilliant than the sun. But if they try to shine while the sun is out, they just obscure its light. And power holders are rarely secure in their positions. Their whole sense of self relies on being the top dog. There can literally only be one sun in the sky, so the stars kind of have to fade into the background to make the sun look brighter, not try to rival it.
Which brings us to this crazy historical reality. Seriously, why on earth was the host of the greatest party in history thrown in prison the very next day? We've got to look at the spectacular tragedy of Nicolas Fouquet. He was the finance minister for the young King Louis XIV of France back in the 1660s. Now, Fouquet was incredibly brilliant, super wealthy, and he just really wanted to show his loyalty and prove how indispensable he was to the king. He figured, hey, staging a magnificent event is going to secure my spot as prime minister for sure.
Talk about absolute whiplash. Check this out. Day one, he hosts literally the most lavish party imaginable at his brand new chateau. I'm talking exotic foods, a premiere play by Molière, insane fireworks, and gardens so magnificent they actually inspired Versailles later on. The whole European elite was there, and they were completely blown away. But then, day two, he's unexpectedly arrested by the king's musketeer, D'Artagnan. The aftermath? He spends the last 20 years of his life in solitary confinement in a remote mountain prison. Literally overnight, he goes from dazzling the elite to total, utter ruin.
So what's actually going on in the king's head here? 2 words: status anxiety. It's that fragile sense of self in leaders that gets super easily threatened by a subordinate's brilliance, wealth, or popularity. Louis XIV, the Sun King, actually felt diminished by this party. His own subjects seemed way more charmed by his finance minister than by him. Now, Louis obviously never admitted he felt insecure. Nope, he just found some legal pretext of embezzlement, locked Fouquet away, and replaced him with Jean-Baptiste Colbert. Colbert was way duller, much tighter with money, but he made sure to funnel all the glory directly back to the king. Fouquet totally disrupted the emotional economy of the hierarchy, and his brilliance became the exact instrument that destroyed him.
Okay, but you definitely don't have to end up in professional solitary confinement. Let's pivot to a really positive counterexample from 1610 to see how a brilliant mind actually managed this exact same fragile ego of his superiors. We are talking about the legendary astronomer Galileo Galilei. So for years, Galileo is barely scraping by, scattering his gifts and discoveries among all these various rulers and getting barely anything in return. Then he completely changed his strategy and focused entirely on the powerful Medici family.
See, Galileo didn't just walk in and say, look at this cool science thing I found. He calculated a deeply flattering narrative in 4 specific steps. Step 1, he discovers Jupiter's 4 moons. Now, step 2, instead of claiming all the scientific glory for himself, he frames these moons as Cosmo II and his 3 brothers, all orbiting Jupiter, which just so happened to be the long-standing emblem of Cosmo I. Step 3, he actually commissions a whole celestial emblem for the family, literally linking their greatness to the heavens. And the result in step 4? Cosmo is so wildly flattered that he names Galileo the official court philosopher and mathematician, full salary included, ending his financial worries forever. Absolute game changer.
When you put these 2 figures side by side, the lesson is basically screaming at us. You absolutely need strategic empathy. Nicolas Fouquet made the master feel diminished by flaunting his own wealth, his taste, his connections. He made it all about himself. Galileo? Galileo made the master shine brighter by dedicating his brilliance entirely to their glory.
He didn't challenge the Medici's intellectual authority, he literally wrote their name in the stars. Elevating the master is quite often the only way to genuinely elevate yourself.
Okay, brace yourself, because this next point from the source material, it's a bit of a tough pill to swallow. We really have to understand that sometimes you can trigger this law entirely by accident, just by existing. The danger of simply being yourself is incredibly real when you're around a super insecure leader. Take Prince Astorre Manfredi back in the year 1500. His natural charm, his youth, his good looks, it just naturally made the notoriously vain Cesare Borgia look less charismatic by comparison. Manfredi wasn't even trying to outshine anyone, but Borgia, he couldn't handle the contrast. Within weeks, the prince was thrown in prison, and they later found his body in the Tiber River with a stone tied around his neck. If you're dealing with monsters of vanity, you literally have to deliberately mute your own advantages when they're around.
And listen, it gets even trickier, because your past success, it absolutely does not guarantee your future safety. Even beloved, long-established favorites can fall fast if they forget this dynamic. Look at the tragic case of the Japanese tea master Rikyu. He was a deeply trusted advisor to the late 16th century warlord Hideyoshi. But Rikyu got comfortable. He took his favor for granted. He actually had a wooden statue of himself, wearing noble sandals, placed in a prominent temple right inside the palace. Hideyoshi saw this as just an intolerable presumption of equality. Just for placing a statue of himself, the warlord ordered Rikyu to commit suicide. The tea master totally forgot that his status was just a grant of power from the master, not some independent right he owned.
All right, so how do we actually use this today? I mean, most of us aren't dealing with 16th century warlords or sun kings, right? But we are absolutely navigating modern organizations filled with insecure bosses. Here are some modern survival tactics pulled directly from the text. First, try acting just slightly naive to solicit the master's expertise. Let them feel smart by teaching you something they already know. Ascribe your best ideas publicly to the master. Say something like, "Oh, this is merely an echo of your earlier insight." Use discreet flattery rather than overt flattery because overt just looks super obvious to your colleagues. If you're a naturally sociable person, don't eclipse the master's sociability. Let them stay the center of attention in the room. And finally, limit those grand displays of your own wealth or means. Remember, disguising or downplaying your strengths is not a weakness if it preserves your position and ultimately increases your long-term power.
Now, the text does outline a reversal to this rule. You don't have to dim your light forever, because power is all about perfect timing and positioning. If you're dealing with what they call a falling star, a master who is weak, declining, or doomed, there's honestly little risk in outshining them. In fact, you might want to discreetly hasten their fall so you can step right into that vacuum. But if you're dealing with a firm master who is solidly established and powerful, you've got to exercise patient endurance. Power naturally fades over time. The subordinate, if just survives and waits, they can eventually outshine and replace the master without ever looking cruel.
Law 1. Never outshine the master. There's a very real reason this is designated as law number 1. Mastering these hierarchical optics is literally your entry ticket. Because if you can't survive in the presence of power, you're never going to be around to play the larger game.
So power isn't just about the good work you do. It's entirely about how your actions are perceived by the people holding the keys. Which brings us to a final crucial question for you to really think about. In your own workplace, are you strategically making your boss feel like the sun, or are you dangerously showing off your own starlight? Take a really hard look at your dynamics. Are you inadvertently playing the role of Nicolas Fouquet? Or are you strategically maneuvering like Galileo? Because sometimes the smartest, most powerful thing a brilliant star can do is just wait patiently for the sun to set before finally taking over the night sky. Thanks for joining me on this explainer. And hey, keep a close eye on your own starlight.